Welcome. I'm so glad that you've decided to join me for a tympanic membrane reading. I can see that you'd like to have more insight into yourself, perhaps your past, maybe even your future. And there are no deeper insights than those that can be found inside the ear canal. If you wouldn't mind sitting down with me just over here, I'll go ahead and explain how it all works to you, and then we'll go ahead with the reading itself. So, here we have a photo of a healthy tympanic membrane with a few of the visible structures labeled. The tympanic membrane, right here, or the eardrum, as most people know it, it is a thin, cone-shaped layer of tissue that separates the external ear canal out here from the middle and inner ear, okay? If you want to take a moment just to take a closer look at anything here, this is an alternate viewpoint of the tympanic membrane, which is mostly what we'll be looking at here, but definitely I think having a sense of where it is, what it is, where it is in relation to some of the other important structures in the whole ear system. I find that it's very helpful in understanding the whole process here. And it's also just interesting for a lot of people seeing all the different parts that are involved in a sound traveling through our ear and through all these different structures before traveling through a nerve into our brain to let us know what we're hearing. All right, and here we have a fairly simple illustration of the tympanic membrane with more detailed labeling of the anatomy of the eardrum. It's one of the fun things that you learn if you study anatomy and physiology, is that something that will look fairly simple is often broken down into all these detailed little parts. And as you'll see when we get to the results portion of our reading, many of the parts labeled here are going to be quite important because they specifically relate to what I look at when I'm doing my analysis. All right? Now, here is an even more simplified illustration. Here it shows you how the tympanic membrane is generally divided into 4 quadrants. So if you hear me referring to quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4 as I'm doing my reading, you have an idea of what I'm thinking about, what I'm looking at, all right? And these generally are going to be the same on everyone. And I just like to be clear about some of the terminology. I like to prepare you for that. every once in a while people will hear some of the words that I'm muttering to myself, and they might think that I'm saying that, oh, they have a superior posterior or an inferior posterior, and that can make people feel really good or really bad or just judged or uncomfortable, and that's, that's not where I'm going with that. It's very strict, very serious, very legitimate tympanic membrane terminology, okay? Nothing to worry about there. All right, so this that you see right here, this is a blank chart, and this is what I will be using during the reading itself. Before the reading, I'll go through a whole series of practices that are designed to prepare your tympanic membranes for the reading, and then I'll go in with an otoscope on both sides to very carefully examine whatever it is that your eardrums have to tell me, okay? I'll take notes as I go along. You'll probably hear me do quite a lot of scribbling and muttering to myself. That's to be expected. And then once we've gone through the whole preparatory process, and once I've gone through and done your reading, and I have written down all the notes for both the left and the right side, we'll come on over to this spot right here, and we will go over the results. So my notes tend to be a bit on the fly. They can be a little messy, a little brief, but feel free to take your paper home with you, of course, and as you're reviewing, as you are reflecting on the things that I've told you, if there's anything that you're looking for clarification on or a reminder of, then I also have this neat service where I do record that last section of the recording, so you can listen back to that if you like, if you want a refresher on anything. All right? Okay. So if you are feeling ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and put this aside for now. I will begin with the preparatory procedures, which they just sort of prime your tympanic membranes. They might clear out any energies that would make it difficult for me to read. And they do some other energetically significant things that make the reading more clear for me. Okay, so we'll begin with that. We'll get through it, and then I will get my otoscope. I'll get nice and deep into your ears. I'll take a very careful, close look at what you have going on in there. I'll take my notes, and then we'll discuss it, all right? So, I have to admit, I am already getting this sort of, like a sort of vibe from you that you're gonna have a very interesting reading. So, I'll be honest, I'm feeling quite excited to see what it is that your tympanic membranes have to tell me, and I'm even more excited to share that with you, okay? So, let's go ahead and move back to where we started. We'll go through the process, and then we'll meet back right here. All right. I'll begin by placing my hands over your ears and sort of cupping my palms to your ears. And that'll give me a sense of the energy that's radiating outwards through your ear canals from your tympanic membranes. After that, I'll prepare the ears with a 3-step process that I've perfected. And then I'll go ahead with my otoscope, get in there, do the reading, and afterwards I'll go over your results with you. Alright? Great. So, if it's quite alright with you, I do need to touch your ears for this part. I'm going to go ahead and place my hands right here. Thank you very much. I got a lot of really good information. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take some incense that I have right here. It's my own special blend. And I'm going to use some of the smoke from the incense. I'll gently blow it into each ear. After that, I'll treat each ear with a warm compress. After that, a special spritz into each ear, and then you'll be fully prepared. All right? Now, let's go ahead and there we go. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and start on this ear. Alright, so you may or may not feel the smoke itself entering your ear, but you will feel my breath as I blow the smoke. I apologize if it tickles at all. And now the other one. Right, you ready? Okay. For the next part, I'll be taking this wonderfully soft, cotton, organic cloth. I have quite a few of them over here that have been prepared. They're very slightly damp. They're wonderfully warm. I'll press one to this side, then to that side. Then I'll stand behind you and do both at the same time. Okay? And then we'll move on to the next stage. So, I'm just going to step over here. I'm going to grab a warm one. Alright. Now you're going to feel me pressing it against your ear. go ahead and grab a fresh new one so that it's perfectly warm. Let's go ahead and bring it over to this ear. Pardon me. All right, here we go. Okay, I'm going to remove it now. Beautiful. All right. I'm going to grab 2 more fresh ones, and then I'll stand behind you so I can get the best hold on your ears, and I'll press the compress on both sides. All right? Great. Okay. So let's put this one away. Grab 2 fresh ones. All right, so I've got one. I've got one for your left ear, one for your right ear, and in just a moment, I'm going to be pressing them firmly to both ears at the same time. All right, are you ready? Okay, let's go. Really good. All right, let's put those away. Grab my spritz. Okay. Now, this little spray bottle right here is the final preparation before the reading. I'll begin by gently spritzing it on this side, and then on this one, and then you'll be ready. Okay? Great. So, alright, this is gonna feel a bit warm. You're gonna feel a little wetness on your ear, but that'll evaporate pretty quickly. Just gonna spritz a little bit. Okay, other side. Here we go. Perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and put away my spray bottle here. Okay. And now, this is where the magic begins. I'm gonna take this otoscope. I'm going to place it first in one ear, then the other. You might hear me taking notes as I go along. I don't want to miss anything. I don't want to forget anything. So we'll begin on this side, then that side. I might go back and forth once or twice just to double check or confirm a few things that I saw, okay? Great. So, alright, so let's get the light on here. And you're going to feel the otoscope entering your left ear. Right here. Okay. And I'm not going to look too closely at the ear canal. Just going straight to the tympanic membrane. And taking a quick survey of each of the four quadrants. 1, 2, 3, 4. Interesting, okay. Come back to that. Taking a look at the parts list, the part that's both interesting qualities to note. Is that, yeah, it's pretty consistent. All four quadrants, I don't know where it's supposed to be. These almost, almost seem like a dry spot. Okay, I'm just gonna remove the otoscope. I'll write a couple quick notes. Be right back with you in a moment. Okay. Alright, I'm gonna place the otoscope back in your ear. Okay, wow. It's a really deep elbow. Okay. And what else would be noticeable? Just there in the corner, definitely. I'll come back to that. And definitely seeing a bit of a edge-shaped deafening preemptive. I just want to get general impressions to start, okay? It's an interesting shape to the cone of light there, for sure. Alright. What else? Let's see if we can follow the annulus all the way around here. Good. That's really interesting. Okay. That's quite shape. All the way around. Okay. So I'm gonna remove the otoscope. Just gonna write a couple quick notes here. What else? There was that bolt. Alright. Fascinating membranes. I can't wait to see what's on the other side. Okay. Alright, so once again, you're going to feel the otoscope entering your ear canal right here. And once again, I'm going to start with a quick overview of all four quadrants. The posterior, superior, anterior, superior, and the posterior, inferior, seeing really similar results to the other side with that kind of unevenness in tone. Very, very irregular. Okay. I think I'm seeing the same kind of interesting thing with that gold line, but I want to verify that on the other side. Okay, and once again, I'm a fairly dull tone with the part of the glass, but on this side, I'm not seeing that dry patch that is on the other side. Okay, I'm gonna remove the otoscope for a moment. Take a few notes. Okay, we have a regular tone on the first end of your tail. Let's make sure. Go back here. Okay, I'm gonna come back in here with the otoscope. Just a moment. Yeah, I'm definitely seeing that. Actually, put the maneuvering on this side as well. I think it's actually even more pronounced on this side. That's really interesting. Okay, so looking a little more closely at the corded timpani, seeing the same exact kind of bolt. On this side, I'm gonna make a note, but I want to double check it. Okay, and yeah. Once again, the elbow, similar to the left side, is quite deep. Okay. Alright, removing the otoscope. Taking a couple more quick notes. Quite deep. Okay, and Alright. Alright. There are a couple things I just want to double check in this ear here. Alright, once again with the otoscope entering your ear canal. And I am really interested in the manubrium here. The shape of it, that's so interesting. We've definitely got to pronounce the S shape on this side. It's not quite as dramatic, but it is really unique for sure. Okay, and that process there, the protrusion from the manubrium, it's absolutely remarkable. I wasn't sure on the first look, but it's perfect, absolutely beautiful. And yes, there's a definite bulge, look like definitely nerve area there. So we're going to note that for sure because it's definitely important. Okay, I'm going to take it around there. Anything I'm missing? Okay, I think I've got all the significant stuff. I think I've got all the really significant stuff, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna remove the otoscope now. A few quick notes. I got the over here we have just perfect shape here. Okay, and that manubrium. Alright, one last look over on this side, and then we should be all set. Okay, once again, placing the otoscope in your ear. Okay, and yeah, once again, with that really, really interesting S-shaped manubrium. Definitely want to make sure to mark that down. And wow, we've got the same, almost mirror image, absolutely perfect process there with the protrusion of the manubrium. Okay, just a moment, I'm going to take the otoscope out. There are a couple things I want to make sure I'm extra careful to make note of. Okay, so got that really pronounced shape here. It's more pronounced on the right. And once again, with the wow. Okay. Coming back in here with the otoscope and look at the annulus on this side, which is really similar to the other side. It's absolutely lovely. The shape, consistency. Wow, that's really nice. Okay, and I don't think there's anything else notes that I definitely don't want to forget. Good shape. Okay, so there's like okay, I think that's everything. Okay. Really cool, amazing. Alright, I'll go ahead and put this aside. Amazing. What a fascinating reading. Alright, I have all my notes just over here. If you wouldn't mind sitting down with me again, I'll go over everything and you can have your detailed reading to take home with you. Alright, let's go. Alright, so before I reveal your results, I just want to start off by saying that everything looks really healthy and in good condition. Sometimes when I point out some of the more interesting or unusual things that I see in people's tympanic membranes, people sometimes can get a little nervous. They might worry that there's something wrong or a problem, and I just want to assure you that I've seen enough tympanic membranes in my career, countless ones, and in that time I've always been very careful to let my clients know if I see anything that might be cause for concern, that they might want to bring to a more conventional doctor. And that doesn't happen very often, and it certainly didn't happen in your case. I did see some unique and interesting things. So as I talk about those, please just be aware that that doesn't mean that there's anything to be concerned about. The more unique and interesting things that I'm referring to are just some of the things that make you, you, okay? Alright. So, are you ready? Alright, let's go and here we have the notes that I took during the reading. They're a bit basic in some points. It's all that I need, and I think if you need to jog your memory looking at this later, you can just listen back to the recording, okay? So, I took notes for both the left and right tympanic membranes. For many people, a lot of the things I see will be consistent bilaterally on both sides, okay? Occasionally, I might see something on one side and not on the other, or I might see something that's more pronounced on one side than on the other, and I'll let you know if that's the case. And those things, again, it doesn't mean that anything's wrong if I see something here and not here, or if I see something on both sides, but it's more noticeable here. In those cases, it's the differences themselves, something being more prominent on one side than the other, that will just give me even more detailed information or more nuance into whatever it is that we're talking about, okay? So, out here we have the pars tensa, and here, and that is the tense, taut part of the membrane, And then we have the pars flaccida, which is more irregular in shape. See a little more variety there from person to person. And it's a bit difficult to see from this particular image, but it has a bit of a triangular shape to it, which is significant to a tympanic membrane reader. Okay? Now, the first thing that I noticed, and this was consistent on both sides, was that your pars tensa was a bit irregular in tone. So as opposed to, in this illustration here, we see this kind of symmetrical darker on the outside and around the umbo here in the deeper part. Yours was almost a bit patchy in tone, in that it might be a little darker in some spots, a little lighter in others, in a way that wasn't necessarily consistent with the structure of the membrane, in the way that I would expect a really typical textbook average one to be. Again, that's totally fine. However, it did give me some insight into your personality, at least currently. And that kind of irregularity in tone in the pars tensa, that is something I see in people who really struggle to balance thinking and doing. And how that manifests can vary a bit from person to person. So in some people, that could mean they put all their energy into thinking and planning and trying to figure out every little step of something, and not a lot of time actually acting on their plans. In some people, that manifests on the other end of the spectrum. So perhaps they are all action with not a lot of thought going into the action. They kind of deal with the results or the repercussions afterwards. It can mean that perhaps a person does do both, the overthinking and the sort of impulsive doing, but not in the ideal situations. I don't know if that might sound familiar to you, that perhaps you might overthink a situation when it would be more appropriate to act, or when you tend to just impulsively jump into something when it would be more prudent to think it through first. So that's a bit broad, but I do ask clients in situations with these types of things to just take some time to reflect on what resonates there. Because oftentimes people with this imbalance aren't fully aware that that is an issue. So even just taking some time to step back and say, am I someone who is all action without a lot of planning? Am I someone who is all planning with not nearly enough action? Or do I do both, but in sort of a more reactionary way, if that makes sense? Do I just sort of do whatever my anxiety or my fear is telling me to do without really stepping back into my wisdom and asking myself, is this a time for thought or a time for action? Because that's the tricky thing, right? Is that it's all about balance and knowing when which one is going to be more appropriate. Generally, when I have this note to give to clients, there's usually something, like one thing that strikes them where they say, oh, yes, I think this one instance or this type of thing is what she's talking about. So don't worry about figuring out the whole issue right now. Just maybe start with that one thing and work outward from there, okay? Alright. Now, your pars flaccida here. It was a bit dull in color on both sides. And I actually noticed there was almost like a dull or like a dry patch on the left side. And this is something I see in people who are either not relaxing enough and or they're not getting the correct quality of relaxation, okay? Now this can get a bit heavy and into your mental processes, so hang in there. But with people who have this issue, I suggest learning to identify and differentiate between dissociation and relaxation, alright? So sometimes I'll say to people, it looks like you're someone who's either not relaxing enough or not getting the correct quality of relaxation, and some people will say, are you kidding me? That's almost my problem. I spend too much time relaxing. I spend hours on the couch on my phone just scrolling or watching Netflix, and I'm still exhausted and I still don't get enough done. Or, apply whatever it is that maybe you do that you think of as relaxation, because what I find is that what a lot of people think of as relaxation is actually dissociation, okay? So it can vary from person to person because different people do different things to dissociate versus relax. So I'm just going to give you some examples, and you can kind of take anything that resonates or use what I'm saying to apply it to your own situation. But dissociation is more like a suspension from the stresses and overwhelms of daily life. There was this sitcom in the late 80s, early 90s called Out of This World, and I watched it when I was a child, and it was about this teenage girl. Her name was Evie, and she was half alien, okay? So her mom was human and her dad was an alien, and this special power that she got as part of being half alien was that she could freeze time, and this was a thing in the show. She would, whenever she wanted to freeze time, she would put her fingers together, and she didn't have long nails like I do, so she actually could. But when she put her nails together, time would freeze for everyone but her. And I was captivated by that when I was a child. I was a very stressed out little kid, and nearly every day before school I would try, because I dreaded school. So I would lie there in bed feeling all stressed out about having to go to school, and I'd close my eyes and I'd try putting my fingers together, hoping it would freeze time, and sadly it never worked. However, mentally, emotionally, that's sort of what's happening with a lot of us when we think that we're resting, when we turn to our phones to scroll, or our television, or this can manifest as a few different things, whether we just find a spot on the wall to stare at and we zone out for a while. And to be clear, dissociation is not bad. There are many appropriate situations for both things, dissociation and relaxation. Dissociation is a survival skill that helps people who are struggling with intensity and overwhelm. And for different people in different situations, being able to dissociate can be an essential skill to preserve their well-being, especially when they're dealing with an extremely stressful situation or stressful circumstances are ongoing where they know they can't leave those circumstances easily or anytime soon. So this is not in any way me saying that anyone should try to not dissociate, because it can be very helpful. It can be a self-preservation thing, and everyone's situation is so different, and you should know best how much of you that you need, okay? And it's more about using your inner wisdom, okay? So dissociation can usually feel more like a suspension. It doesn't necessarily solve anything. It doesn't necessarily help you to feel more rested or more energized. It's just a break that you take when that's really what you need, okay? Whereas rest is more nourishing, okay? And for some people, scrolling on their phone or watching TV can be restful, right? There are a lot of applications for both. Watching a movie when you're someone who really loves movies and finds them inspiring, and maybe you like to do film analysis, or you're really interested in costumes and you get inspiration from movies and TV shows. Those are examples where you might find nourishment in those types of things, right? So even a nap could be more dissociation than it is rest, okay? But for many people, rest involves some sort of active participation, some sort of choice. Does that make sense? I'm going to nap because I need to replenish my body's energy resources. I'm going to go out and see this new independent film that I've been looking forward to because I know I'm going to find it inspirational, or I'm going to find the emotional scenes to be cathartic. Oftentimes, rest can actually seem like activity, like going for a walk. It doesn't necessarily sound like it's restful, but if it's nourishing for you, then that can qualify as rest. So there's quite a lot that goes into this. But the bottom line here is that what I'm seeing is that it is an area where you have an imbalance, and it's not something you have to figure out or fix right away, but just being aware of it is a great start, so that you can start to identify throughout the course of your day, as I'm going to do this, am I dissociating or am I resting? And if I'm dissociating, is that really the best thing for me right now? Or might I want to consider some of my more restful options and try one of those? There's no right answer here. It's going to vary from situation to situation, and it all just starts with identifying when you are doing which one And then once you've gotten good at that, at identifying, is this A or B, is this dissociation or relaxation, then you can start to ask yourself, how is this serving me? Am I getting too much of this, not enough of that? Am I pressuring myself to do too much of these restful things and not allowing myself these moments of dissociation because I've decided that that's bad or something, when in fact maybe it's something you need to go easy on yourself with? Just, begin to notice it and work towards more of a balance. Gradual process, baby steps. All right, I'm gonna bring this back again real quick. Behind your tympanic membrane, there are some bones back here. It's a series of bones called the auditory ossicles. And some of these structures are visible through the tympanic membrane because it's a bit translucent, especially if I'm shining a light on it. And one of the things that we can see behind the membrane, through the membrane, is right here. And that is a bone called the malleus. So the malleus plays an essential role in conducting or transmitting sound through the membrane and into the inner ear, okay? So the part of the bone that we can see here, of course, that's the manubrium, and it is loosely attached to the tympanic membrane, okay? Now, your manubrium has a distinct S-curve to it, much more so than with most people. It's on both sides, but it's more pronounced on the right. This indicates to me that you are someone who might struggle at times to differentiate between intuition and anxiety. And this is another either or thing, which can manifest as different things with different people. So I hope you'll bear with me. It's my job to point out some of the broader points of what might be possible, and then yours to listen to what I'm saying, get a sense for what resonates with you, and add some of that fine-tuning to how specifically it applies to you. All right? Now, differentiating between intuition and anxiety can be very difficult. There's some shortcuts for telling the difference, but they're not foolproof. I generally like to say that anxiety escalates and intuition persists. Anxiety is terrified that you won't listen to it, okay? So if you have an anxiety and you push it down or don't act on it, it's likely to sort of get louder and louder and more desperate. Whereas intuition tends to be more secure in its own truth, okay? Intuition will let you know that it's there, and it will speak calmly if you listen to it. But if you choose to ignore it, it's not going to get all worked up, usually, in the way that anxiety will. And I do want to acknowledge here, again, that this can be very complicated and messy. Intuition can be wrong sometimes, and there are instances where anxiety can be right? Sometimes they can be on the same page as one another, and both are giving you more or less the same message at the same time. But ultimately, intuition is sourced from your own inherent inner wisdom, and it taps into some very wise and complex parts of your mind that you generally can't hear or process in an intentional, conscious way, okay? There's a lot of wisdom in our subconscious, much more than we give it credit for. And our intuition can act like a messenger between the subconscious and conscious levels of our mind. Anxiety, on the other hand, develops over time from our past experiences, right? It takes the bones of things that have hurt us in the past, and it uses those materials as a kind of like a blueprint for building predictions for the future. Warnings of what it thinks might be likely to happen. And sometimes it gets things right. It can successfully predict patterns. It's not unintelligent. Anxiety can be very smart sometimes. However, this is an important however, because I do want to give anxiety its due. It has its uses, and it can be very helpful. But since anxiety tends to be highly reactive and extremely judgmental, it gets much more wrong than it gets right. And the net effect of that is that it hurts us more than it helps us. So even though there's this temptation to say, oh, my anxiety was correct this time, and it helped me out this time, I better listen to it. Now, I'm not saying we should ignore it. I'm just saying that we should have a balanced perception of net help here, because even though it does help us sometimes, it's important to remember all the times that it limited us, that it stopped us from expanding ourselves and our possibilities in life. And for those reasons, we don't want it to be our top authority. So, just as with the last couple of things that we covered, my advice to you would be to work on just differentiating between the two. Not with the intention of silencing or sidelining anxiety, but with the intention of trying to get them to work together as accountability buddies, almost. At least for an extended transition. Ideally, for most of us, we will get to the point where we are mostly making our choices from intuition, more so than anxiety. But it can take a long time to get there, and that's okay, because it's more important to do it effectively in a way that helps us to build trust with ourselves. That's much more important than doing it quickly, okay? Because so many of us hear anxiety very easily, but we struggle to hear our intuition. So if we tried to just cut off our anxiety's voice completely, we wouldn't be getting any information at all. So instead, to start, just start trying to identify each of them, and if you can, use them to check each other. By balancing them and making them a working pair, that's often going to be the most effective way to grow them into the most helpful versions of what they are. Moving on, I'd like to draw your attention to this little protrusion here on both sides. And this is also part of the malleus. And on you, on both sides, it is absolutely stunning. It's perfect, it's superb, it is textbook gorgeous. Like if you asked an artist to draw this protrusion in a textbook and draw the ideal, most beautiful possible section of the malleus here, it would look like yours. Maybe not even that nice. And that indicates to me profoundly that you are someone who really needs to trust the process, as they say. More than with the average person, you may struggle from time to time with confidence as to whether or not you're on the right path in life. And that's quite normal to question it. Many of us have goals, or we might not even have specific goals. We might have a direction we want to head in. We might have chosen what we think is the best plan, and we're hoping it'll turn out in the best possible way for us. So this is also a helpful sign because I don't see one that looks quite this nice in very many people, but consistently when I do, it's people who are questioning their path in life, quite often because they are maybe hitting up a lot of obstacles or stumbling blocks, or what they're perceiving as personal failures. Maybe in people who have this perception that things keep going wrong. So this is an indication to me that although the path from A to B might, for you, be a little more twisty and turny than you would prefer or than you would expect it, that you are on the right path. It doesn't indicate for sure that your current goals or hopes are the ones that you will achieve or wind up with, because for so many people those change over time. But it is a very clear indication that although the path might not be the most scenic one at times, or the most pleasant one to travel on, that you are going in the right direction. So that's very encouraging. For some people, I might see something that would make me say, you might want to take a little break and stop and step back and look at everything because you've gotten turned around, or you've gone down maybe a not ideal side path. This is what I see in people who actually might get turned around sometimes, or might go down a side path, but for whom those side paths or those changes in direction are actually an important part of the overall journey that you're going on. Okay, so what we see here and here, although this isn't quite what it looks like on you, this here is something we call the cone of light, and that is a cone-shaped reflection in the tympanic membrane that's caused by the light from the otoscope shining onto the membrane. Now, your cone of light is, it's actually more of a bar than a cone. Its width is consistent all the way across from one end to the other, and it's actually quite narrow. And this indicates to me that there is a need for you right now in your life to think more creatively about obstacles in your life, or about the things that you're struggling with. There are some challenges you've been frustrated with. I'm thinking problems that you can't quite seem to crack, no matter how many different ways you approach them or how hard you work at them. Most of us have this tendency to try to attack obstacles in our life just head on, regardless of whether these obstacles are external or internal, but we tend to attack them head on, like they're a big impassable boulder in our path. And approaching these obstacles creatively, it doesn't necessarily mean coming up with some really unusual or novel or fantastical way to deal with a problem, though it can be that. It's more about stepping back, getting a wide, neutral perspective on the problem, and finding a path of approach that is different from how you usually approach problems. Okay? Sometimes these creative approaches can be so simple as to almost seem silly or obvious in retrospect. Just to give you a quick example, I had a client a while back who had a early morning college class that she was really, really struggling with. It was, I want to say, like a 7 a.m. class, and she lived about an hour away from campus. She was not a morning person, and it was such a struggle for her to get to this class on time, to not miss it entirely, to be alert and engaged while she was in class, and it was really important to her educational path that she do well in this class. And she attacked this problem head on. She tried all these different tricks and methods for getting a better night's sleep, for trying to transition into more of a morning person, all these different ideas for motivating herself or making it easier. And after all these frustrations, she stopped and she stepped back and she thought about the situation more creatively. And what she wound up doing is she simply looked at her course catalog, found another version of the same class that was offered later in the day. And that might not sound like creativity, but it really was. Instead of fighting against who she was and how she worked best, she changed the situation. She took the challenge out of it by finding an alternative way of getting what she needed. And a solution like that, an alternative like that, isn't going to be an option in every situation, of course. I just wanted to give you an example of how oftentimes this creative thinking isn't necessarily huge or revolutionary in the objective sense, but for the individual, it's just a different way of approaching the problem and how it should be solved. So I don't know specifically what it is that you're struggling with, but this right here is telling me that you are missing something as far as the most ideal solution to managing these obstacles that you're running into. Okay, now this area out here, this is called the annulus. And the annulus is like a thickened ring of tissue that goes around the perimeter of the pars tensa. It supports the membrane and it anchors it in place. It's not a circle. It doesn't go completely all the way around. It's more horseshoe shaped. And yours looks great on both sides. It's very even and consistent in its shape. Absolutely beautiful. A little thinner at the edges here and then wider towards the middle. It's so beautifully symmetrical. And because this is a part of the ear anatomy that we associate with luck and resilience, this says something really wonderful about you. It says that you are someone who has more luck and more of a talent for resilience than the average person. And some people laugh at that because, unfortunately, some of the people with the most luck and the most resilience have difficulty seeing that because they're also the people who need that luck and resilience because of all the obstacles they run into in life. So please don't discount that if it doesn't automatically sound correct for you. I would just encourage you to consider the possibility that you actually get quite a bit of luck your way and that you are actually wonderfully resilient. And that doesn't mean that the bad luck that comes your way or the struggles that you have aren't real. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying keep an eye out for the luck. Keep an eye out for the resilience. Maybe you're not giving yourself enough credit for those things. All right? Now, there is something called the chorda tympani nerve, It is a facial nerve. It conducts your ability to taste. So it travels from the brainstem through the middle ear and into the mouth. Okay, so there's a whole journey there that it takes. Since it passes under the malleus, sort of, it can really vary how visible its presence is from person to person. In you, however, something I noticed is that it is visibly bulging a little bit in both sides. It's not just noticeable, it has like a little bit of almost a swelling or a bulge. And I want to be careful with how I word that, because some people can think, oh no, is it infected? Is there something wrong with it? Nope. Nothing to worry about. Everything looks very healthy. These kinds of variations are quite normal. However, it does indicate to me that your tastes are in a state of change right now, okay? So based on the appearance of the bulge, I'm guessing this has been going on for a little while now, and it's likely to continue for some time. Many of us get into these patterns or habits where we think we know what we like, and we get into making a lot of automatic decisions, whether it's what we order for a meal or what choice of activities we make for ourselves. A lot of these we start to make automatically based on what we know about ourselves and what we like, but something you have probably started to already notice yourself is that there has been some adjustments or changes to your taste. Maybe that means that you're not enjoying things as much now that you used to. Maybe it means that you're opening up the spectrum of things you enjoy. Maybe it's actually getting a little more narrower and more focused. I'm not sure. I just know that it's in a state of flux right now. And that's a good thing to be aware of, just so that we are making choices that support our happiness. So next time you make a decision that is related to your personal taste, again, a great example is what to have for lunch. Maybe take a moment and just double check, do I want the thing that I would choose automatically, or am I interested in trying something different? And again, this can be tricky because trying new things can come with the consequence of having some things here and there that we don't enjoy so much. But because this is in a state of change for you, I would recommend opening up and be open to some successes and failures with whatever that means for you. Maybe just don't assume that you know what you want based on what you've enjoyed every time prior. Take a few moments here and there to ask yourself, is this actually what I want? And it might be, but I think you're going to find some situations where that's not the case, and exploring the way that your tastes are changing is going to serve you for sure. Alright, now, finally, let me bring that other image back real quick. Now, as a reminder, you can see it a little bit here better in the shading. Maybe, we'll see. The tympanic membrane is conical in shape, okay? So as you move from the edges of the membrane toward the center, it gets deeper, okay? So the central area here of the membrane, this is referred to as the umbo, U-M-B-O, umbo, and it marks the deepest, or I'd say the most depressed part, but it has nothing to do with depression or sadness. It's just sort of the deepest part of the membrane. So yours is actually quite deep. I was very interested to see how much. There's more of a elevation change as we move from the edges to the center, more so than what we'd see in most people's ears. And this indicates to me that you are someone who has more doors open to you than you realize. Or it might be more correct to say that you're someone who has many more paths from point A to point B than you really realize, okay? So many people, and I struggle with this sometimes too, many people have this perception that life is like a multiple choice test, and every time we are faced with a decision, there's this feeling that of all the choices out there, there's just one correct choice, okay? And there's this one correct choice, and anything else we choose is wrong or incorrect or will lead to bad results. And that's simply not the case. With the occasional rare exception, when we are faced with a choice, in some senses it would almost feel easier if there was one correct choice, because that feels like less to figure out, right? But in fact, with many people, there are multiple correct choices we could make that would all eventually lead us to the place where we're supposed to be. And some might take a little longer or be a little less pleasant, but with all people, and more so with you than with most, there are many paths in most situations that are going to get you where you need to go. And the image that I'm getting right now is with a stream, okay? So picture a stream, okay? And we're going to super simplify this into just one decision and one outcome, even though we know that getting to an outcome can involve many different branches and choices. It's a process. But for here, let's just say there's one set of choices that gets us from point A to point B, okay? So a lot of people think that there's one way to get there, and any other choice is going to leave them lost or heading off in the wrong direction, okay? But no. For you, in most situations, they're almost like these rivulets, okay? And some of them might be more winding, or they might branch off and involve making other choices. But they are eventually all going to lead you to where you want to be, or to where you're supposed to be. A good, right place for you. Are there wrong choices or bad choices that we can make in any given situation? Of course. However, I'm here to tell you that your intuition is more sound than you realize, despite the fact that you might be afraid of making wrong choices. That's your anxiety, intuition pull there. That in nearly every situation that you're going to be coming up against in the near and honestly distant future, there are not going to be many of those multiple choice situations where you have to get the right answer to get to the correct place. We all usually have many different paths that we could take to get from point A to point B, and you are actually someone who has more than most. Your destiny or your forward progression has more of an internal quality of course correction than with most people. So going back towards the beginning of our talk and talking about balancing thinking versus doing and anxiety versus intuition, these are all examples of how there are more beneficial outcomes to any given situation than you probably realize in most situations. So if you have big decisions coming up, don't pressure yourself so much to get the right answer. Use your best judgment, and I'm here to tell you that you can trust that in most situations, even if you don't make the ideal or fastest or most direct route from A to B, you're still going to get there, okay? And there are many situations in which the most direct route isn't actually going to be the best route, because there are all sorts of other things you can pick up along the way with these longer, more meandering routes. Sometimes we're just not ready for the things we want. Sometimes the things we want aren't ready for us. Sometimes the thing we really want, that we want a direct route for, we'll figure out later on isn't actually the thing we want the most. Varies from situation to situation, of course. I'm just telling you this to hopefully take off some of the pressure of that decision making, whether you're facing the decision or looking back and questioning the decisions you've made previously. There is so much more hope and opportunity for you than I think you're realizing right now. All in all, this is a beautiful reading, and it's something to feel really good about. I personally think that you are in a much better spot in life right now than you're maybe giving yourself credit for. Be gentle with yourself. Try not to judge the outcomes of your choices too quickly or too profoundly. Maybe your anxiety or your intuition is saying, I made this choice and I don't know if I'm going in the right direction. And that can be valuable information, but don't panic too quickly in those situations. Let yourself step back, think creatively, look around, have a little bit more of an open mind when it comes to this life progression that you're concerned about. All right? Well, I hope you enjoyed your reading, because I know I did. I'm going to give you this to take home with you if you'd like. Let's go ahead and move back over there so we can wrap up our session, and we'll say our goodbyes. And I can tell you already that I'm very much looking forward to another opportunity. I hope to work with you again. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad you came in today. I haven't had a tympanic membrane reading that was quite this interesting in a very long time. I'm honored that I got to be the one who did it, and I truly wish you the best. I hope you'll come back soon for perhaps a more in-depth reading or one of my other services. Thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.